Hi, my name is Tom Hanlon. I'm an instructor here at EventStore. Today I'm going to walk you through the steps needed to create a cluster in our EventStore Cloud product and connect to that cluster from an instance in your cloud. Today's focus is AWS. Note, in order to complete these steps, you will need provisioning rights in EventStore Cloud, and you will need administrator rights in AWS. Let's go ahead and get started. Here is a list of the tasks that we will be performing. Note that the tasks in yellow stickies are tasks that we perform in the EventStore Cloud. Note that tasks in the blue stickies are performed in the AWS console. So, let's get started. First step, read the docs. You can find the docs by going to the eventstore.com page, selecting Resources, Documentation, and then the documentation we want in particular is in the EventStore Cloud section. And what we'll be working through today is largely outlined here on the left nav panel under the provisioning section. There's a lot of steps, so we felt like a video would help. So let's get started. First step, creating a project in the EventStore console. In the EventStore console, you will be a member of an organization. Organizations may have one or more projects. It's within these projects that we create our clusters. In addition to the cluster, we create the associated resources of the network and the peering connection to peer the network we run the cluster in with the network you will use to access it. When you create a project, you'll want to give it a name. And let's go ahead and create the project. All right. Note that the next steps are highlighted here. They include creating a new cluster, creating a network for the cluster, and creating the peering connection. Next step, create a network in the EventStore console. When you go into the EventStore console, in your project, right, you will see in the middle, right, there is a Create a Network button. Let's go ahead and select that. When you create a network, you get to choose your cloud provider. You get to choose the region where the cluster is being provisioned. You get to choose the CIDR block. I'm highlighting it here because this is important information for later, but you'll have another opportunity to copy and paste that. All right. After we create the network, it'll go through a provisioning stage before it goes into an available stage. Next step, creating a cluster in the EventStore console. Come back to the console, choose your project. And I want to point out a helpful feature here across the top. There's this little breadcrumb trail of tasks that need to be completed, more or less in order, right? A network is required for a cluster, and a network is required for the peering. So the network comes first. But we are ready to create our cluster, so let's choose Create Cluster. Give the cluster a name, and choose a version of Event Store DB. I'm going to choose the LTS version, which stands for long-term support. You also get to choose whether or not to enable system and user projections, and you get to choose the size of the instance. I am choosing a small instance here to save money, since this is just for demo purposes. I am also choosing a single node instance, but note for production, you'd want a 3-node cluster. After you click Create Cluster, it'll go through an initializing phase before it becomes available. Next step, creating a network in AWS. Note that this sticky is in blue. Blue stickies are AWS tasks. In AWS, you want to come to Services, come to the VPC dashboard, and you want to take a look at your VPCs. Note that your AWS account comes with a default VPC. We don't want to use that. We want to create one on our own. In the top right, you will see Create VPC. Select that to get started. All right, so when you're creating a VPC in AWS, you have some options. Give it a name. Choose a CIDR block. Note that I add some tags here. I don't do that for every example in today's video, but it is good practice, particularly in a multi-user organization, to tag your resources. Next step, initiate peering in the Event Store console. This is where you initiate the process of allowing connection between the network running the cluster and the network that we just created in AWS. So click on Create New Peering. Give the peering connection a name. Select the network that you are peering to, and then this information here we pull from our AWS account. So you're going to see me scroll over to my AWS account here to get that information. We need our account, and that's up here in the top. We need the peer VPC ID. This is the VPC ID from AWS. And note that that can be copied over here in the top left of the details. So copy that information over. You have to add the CIDR block of the network that you are peering to. So go back to the AWS console, grab that information, and copy it over. Click on Create Peering, and note that peering will be in the provisioning state until we do the next step, which is to accept the peering in AWS. Next step, accept network peering in the AWS console. Come over to your VPCs. Click on Peering Connections in the lower left. All right, and you will see a peering connection request. So in order for this to be enabled, you need to accept the request, which can be done here in the top right. In a short period of time, in the Event Store console, we will see the peering go from provisioning to available. Next step, add a subnet to your VPC in the AWS console. We'll need a subnet in order to create instances in this VPC, so we'll go ahead and create one. Choose your VPC, And in the top right, choose Create Subnet. Choose the CIDR block for the subnet and click Create. Next step, add Internet Gateway to your VPC in AWS. In order to test our connection, I'd like to be able to log into an instance, right, in my VPC from my laptop. In order to do that, you need an Internet Gateway. So let's create one and attach it to our VPC. All right, in the top right, once again, you'll see Create Internet Gateway. And then after we create the Internet Gateway, we need to attach it to our VPC. Once again, that's in the top right. Choose Attach to VPC and select your VPC and attach. We now have an Internet Gateway that would allow us to connect inbound into our VPC. I'm going to go ahead and create an EC2 instance in AWS. Go up to Services, select EC2. I'm going to create a small Linux instance. Give it a name. I'm choosing Ubuntu. Choose whatever you're comfortable with. I'm choosing a micro instance, and then I already have a key pair. If you don't have one, you'll need to create one. Amazon has great instructions on that. We want to make sure that we create this instance in our VPC, so select that. The Launch Wizard security group is usually satisfactory for testing purposes. This just controls what inbound and outbound network traffic the instance will accept. After we launch the instance, I'm going to attempt to connect to the instance. So you'd think we have all the moving pieces, right? We have the gateway, we have the instance, we have our key pair. So I'm going to get the information on the SSH connection string and attempt to connect through to the instance. Notice that this just hangs. This is expected. We're actually missing another piece. What we're missing is, although the gateway allows inbound traffic, we need to allow outbound traffic. So what we need to do is we need to add a route to the gateway. So you want to select your subnet. You want to edit the route table. And we want to add a route to the gateway. We're going to create this as the default route, 000. So any IP addresses that don't match any other routes will go to this destination. And we choose the target as our internet gateway and save the changes. So now, right, we should have the ability to have inbound and outbound traffic from our EC2 instance. Let's check. Look at that. It looks like I am successful. So we can now connect to our instance in EC2. Next step, add a route to the event store network in the AWS console. Just like in order to have two-way communication with our instance, we needed a route to the gateway, any traffic that's destined for our event store cluster is going to need a route. So just like we did, we want to edit the route table. We want to add a route to, and this information we get from the Event Store Cloud Console. We want to add a route to the range of IP addresses in our peered network and copy those over. And then we want this destination to be the peering connection. save those changes, and now the instance that we can SSH into should also be able to connect to Event Store. Next step, verify the connection to the cluster. All right, so how do we get the IP address of the cluster? Well, if you go into Event Store Cloud Console, there's this link there, connect to the cluster. This will launch a web app, right? And so the issue here is this web app's running on my laptop, so it's not going to be able to connect through to my cluster. But it will give us the information we need. So go ahead and open it up, right, and click Continue Anyway. So select any client, it doesn't matter. What we're looking for is the connection string that appears there in the top. We want to copy this connection string. We're going to modify this string so that we can do an HTTP request to the cluster to see if it's alive. So we change ESDB to HTTPS, and we append /gossip. Now the gossip protocol is what cluster nodes use to communicate with each other, and we can use this gossip protocol over HTTPS to check to see if the cluster's available. As we see, we got a response, so we are ready to go. Next step would be to perhaps take a look at the From Scratch series in Event Store Academy that walk you through creating your environment from scratch, appending events, and reading it. Useful for people with little or no programming experience. Well, enjoy your journey with Event Store Cloud.